January 24, 1947. Midday in the Strait of Malacca. The sea was flat and bright under a hard tropical Sunday. The water looked like a sheet of silver stretching from one horizon to the other. Heat shimmered above the surface, and even the breeze had stopped moving. Merchant ships of the post-war world moved slowly across the calm channel, their steel hulls warm under the light. It felt like an ordinary day on one of the busiest sea lanes in Southeast Asia. At 12:20 hours, the calm changed. Allied radio operators heard a sudden burst of static on the distress frequency. A faint human voice followed, carrying strain and fear beneath the crackling signal. The message reported officers lying dead on the bridge and in the chart room. It reported that the crew was probably dead as well. The transmission ended with a final short phrase that cut off without warning. After that moment, the radio fell silent. Nearby ships waited for a second message. None came. The ocean returned to its stillness. Minutes later, a lookout spotted a freighter drifting on the horizon. No flag, no smoke, no movement. A ship that should have been alive. Instead, it floated without a sign of life, as if holding a secret inside its cold steel hull. This was the beginning of the mystery. In the years immediately after the Second World War, the seas of Southeast Asia entered a strange period of recovery. The war had ended only 18 months earlier. Ports in Singapore, Penang, Batavia, and Manila were still repairing damaged docks, rebuilding warehouses, and clearing wreckage left by years of fighting. Merchant fleets that had been scattered, sunk, or requisitioned by military forces were slowly returning to civilian routes. By early 1947, the Strait of Malacca had again become one of the most active shipping corridors in the world. Oil tankers moved between Sumatra and Singapore. Cargo ships carried machinery, food supplies, and reconstruction materials to cities struggling to stand again after occupation and bombardment. Patrol craft from Allied navies still watched the waters, clearing mines, intercepting smugglers, and assisting any vessel in trouble. Yet, despite the appearance of normal activity, the region remained far from safe. Thousands of naval mines laid by Japanese and Allied forces still rested beneath the surface. Many drifted from their original positions with the currents. Unmarked wrecks lay hidden below the waterline. Engines failed often on ships that had been repaired quickly. Radio equipment was unreliable after years of heavy use. Some captains feared pirates. Others feared sabotage. Distress calls were not unusual during this period. Most were mechanical failures. Some were fuel shortages. A few were false alarms caused by faulty transmitters. But when a message spoke about entire crews lying dead, officers listening knew they were facing something far outside routine danger. The story that would later be connected to the name Ourang Medan did not begin as a legend. It began as a series of fragmented reports. The earliest printed mention appeared in an Italian newspaper in 1940. It described an unnamed ship found adrift in the Pacific with its crew dead under unexplained conditions. That article disappeared into wartime chaos. 8 years later, a Dutch-Indonesian newspaper published a similar account. This time, it gave the ship a name, Ourang Medan. It described a distress call. It described a boarding party finding lifeless sailors. It described a sudden fire that consumed the vessel before it could be examined. These reports were dramatic, but not fully sourced. Government authorities never confirmed them. Naval archives in Britain, America, the Netherlands, and Australia contained no record of a ship by that name. No shipping registry listed it. No insurance claim was ever filed for it. That absence of documentation created the central question that historians still debate. Was the event real but unrecorded? Or was it a story built from fragments of other accidents and passed along by sailors until it hardened into a mystery? What is certain is the environment of 1947 allowed such a story to spread. Sailors relied on each other for warnings. Rumors moved faster than official reports. A tale about a silent ship drifting across calm water, carrying a dead crew with no visible cause, fit naturally into the uneasy mood of the post-war sea. And it set the stage for what the crew of the American merchant ship Silver Star was about to discover. The American merchant ship Silver Star was among the closest vessels to the distress frequency at the moment the strange message was heard. Her crew had spent months moving cargo between ports in the region. They knew the routine calls of traffic control, the clipped requests for assistance, and the occasional voice of a captain trying to keep calm while reporting mechanical trouble. None of those sounded like the message they had just received. The Silver Star altered course at once. Officers spread navigational charts across the bridge table and estimated the likely origin of the signal. With no coordinates repeated, they had to rely on direction, strength, and instinct. The ship increased speed across a sea that remained unnaturally calm under the bright midday Sunday. Hours passed as the crew searched the horizon for signs of damage or distress. They expected to find a slick of oil or drifting debris. These markers usually meant an engine fire or a hull breach. Instead, the narrow line where sea met sky remained empty. The only sound was the slow percussion of the Silver Star cutting through clear water. Then, late in the afternoon, a lookout called down from the mast, a vessel ahead, motionless, drifting very slightly with the current. Officers raised binoculars. The ship they saw was medium-sized, likely a coastal freighter. Her hull rode evenly on the surface and showed no sign of listing. No smoke rose from her funnel. No crew walked her decks. No flag flew at her mast. Her lifeboats were secured in their davits, untouched. Her appearance was unsettling, not because of damage, but because of the absence of it. A ship adrift with no visible reason. A freighter that looked completely intact, yet silent. As the Silver Star drew closer, the mood on board changed. The calm sea no longer felt peaceful. It felt expectant, as if holding its breath. The officers sent repeated radio calls toward the drifting vessel. No response came. They tried signal lamps. They sounded the ship's whistle. The other ship gave no sign of movement. It did not even seem abandoned in the usual sense. Abandoned ships often had torn rigging or open hatches. This one looked as if its crew had simply vanished between 1 hour and the next. Caution was necessary. During and after the war, some drifting vessels had been booby-trapped by retreating forces or used by pirates as bait. Others had struck mines that remained unstable near damaged hull plates. The crew discussed the risks, but the distress message gave them little choice. A denial of assistance could cost lives. A boarding team was prepared quietly. Men checked their breathing gear and equipment. As the evening light began to soften across the water, the Silver Star positioned itself alongside the silent ship. Steel met steel in the gentle slap of small waves. The rescue began. A small boat carried the boarding party from the Silver Star to the base of the drifting freighter's hull. The ship loomed above them, dark against the fading sky. The steel plates felt strangely cold when the first sailor reached for the ladder. The temperature was unusual, even considering the metal's natural properties. The boarding party climbed carefully, aware that one misstep or hidden hazard could turn the operation into disaster. When they reached the deck, the silence was absolute. No machinery vibrated beneath their feet. No ventilation fans hummed. Even the sound of the sea felt muted. The first body appeared only a few steps from the rail. A sailor lay flat on his back with rigid arms pressed against the deck. His face held a look of severe fear. The muscles around his eyes and mouth were drawn tight. There were no external injuries, no burns, no blood. It looked as though he had died in a moment of extreme shock, frozen in the final second of life. More bodies lay near the main hatch. 2 more at the base of the bridge ladder. One rested against the bulwark with his head tilted back as if staring at the sky in the last moment before death. A dog lay between 2 men on the deck, its teeth bared in silent tension. Nothing in the arrangement of equipment suggested a struggle. Tools remained where they would normally be placed. Ropes were neatly coiled. The ship appeared frozen in routine, yet every life on board had been cut short. Inside the superstructure, the air was heavy and stale. The corridors felt unnaturally cool for a ship left under the tropical Sunday. In the chart room, a sailor lay face down across navigational tables. In the wheelhouse, the helmsman sat upright in his chair with his hands near the wheel, as if he had simply stopped living while performing his duties. Down in the engine control room, another man rested against a bulkhead with open eyes. The machinery showed no signs of overheating, no exploded pipes, no ruptured steam lines. The air carried a faint metallic smell that the boarding party could not identify. In the radio room, the wireless set was undamaged. The operator lay on the floor beside his chair. His hand rested near the key he had likely used to send the distress call. The logbook contained routine entries, no mention of enemy ships or of sudden danger. Some later retellings have claimed that the final entry noted unusual vibrations felt in the hull, but official sources never confirmed this detail. Whether it was true or part of later embellishment remains unclear. The deeper the men searched, the more disturbing the scene became. Every body showed the same rigid posture and the same expression of fear. No crew member had attempted to reach the lifeboats. None had put on protective gear. Whatever occurred happened swiftly, leaving no time for reaction. The boarding team decided the ship could not be left adrift. It had to be examined later under tow. They prepared to secure a towing line. The decision to tow the vessel was made on the bridge of the Silver Star. Orders were passed to attach a line. The boarding team worked across the still deck, careful not to disturb the bodies more than necessary. The steel beneath their boots felt colder with each passing minute. When the tow line was ready, men returned toward the ladder. Then, faint wisps of smoke rose from the forward hold. At first, it looked like steam. Within moments, it thickened. The smoke darkened and carried a harsh chemical smell. Heat spread through the metal plates beneath their feet. The boarding team shouted warnings and retreated toward the ladder. They climbed down to the waiting boat and pulled away from the ship as the smoke grew. Flames appeared along the edges of the hatch. Within minutes, the fire spread across the deck. The Silver Star cut the tow line to avoid being pulled into danger. The drifting freighter became engulfed in orange light as the fire reached its cargo spaces. A violent explosion followed. The shock wave sent ripples across the water. The ship shuddered, tilted, and began to sink by the bow. Water rushed over the deck and into the ruptured hull. Within a short time, the entire vessel disappeared beneath the surface, taking every body and every clue into deep water. The calm sea closed over the wreck as if sealing the mystery. The Silver Star recorded the sighting in its logs, but with the ship lost and no survivors found, the incident became another unverified story carried by sailors across changing seas. In the decades that followed, historians, naval engineers, and maritime investigators proposed explanations for what might have happened on the ship, often called the Ourang Medan. None of these theories can be proven, but several have enough scientific basis to be considered plausible. One of the strongest theories involves hazardous chemical cargo. During the final years of the Second World War, many nations secretly transported chemical agents, including potassium, cyanide, and other volatile substances. Some were moved without proper records. If such chemicals were stored in a poorly ventilated hold, seawater entering through a small leak could trigger reactions that produced toxic gases. These gases, heavier than air, would rise slowly through compartments, overwhelming a crew before they understood the danger. This could explain the lack of external injuries and the rigid posture of the bodies. Exposure to certain gases can cause muscle contraction at the moment of death. Another possibility is carbon monoxide poisoning from a smoldering fire in the engine room. A slow burn could fill the ship with invisible gas. The crew would collapse within minutes. If the fire later found additional fuel or reached pressurized compartments, it could cause the sudden explosion observed by the Silver Star. A third explanation focuses on electrical failure. Salt-contaminated cables can cause powerful flashovers. In a steel ship, a high-voltage surge can travel through rails, ladders, and bulkheads. Anyone touching metal surfaces at that moment might suffer immediate cardiac arrest. Some investigators believe this could explain why the bodies showed no burns, yet had expressions of severe distress. There are also administrative explanations. The absence of registry records might be due to the ship operating under a false name. Some vessels engaged in smuggling or covert transport avoided official registration. If such a ship met disaster, no insurance company would claim it, and no government would acknowledge it. This could explain why no archival record of the Ourang Medan has ever been found. Historians generally agree that while the tale is dramatic, the lack of documentation makes it impossible to confirm. What remains is a case built on second-hand accounts, newspaper stories, and retellings by sailors. Even so, the theories show that the event, if real, could have a natural explanation tied to the dangerous conditions of post-war maritime transport. Stories about the sea often survive not because they are proven, but because they resonate with long-standing fears. The years after the war created an environment where mysteries found eager listeners. Sailors traveled through waters still marked by conflict. Governments released only limited information about wartime operations. Rumors of secret cargoes and hidden missions were common. In this atmosphere, a tale about a ship found intact and filled with dead crew members spread easily between ports. The image itself is unforgettable. A silent vessel drifting across calm water. A distress call ending abruptly. A deck scattered with men caught in the final instant of fear. A sudden fire that destroys the only evidence. These elements form a story that feels cinematic even without embellishment. They create a gap between what is known and what is imagined. That gap invites speculation. The story also reflects the fragile nature of life at sea. Sailors depend on steel hulls, engines, and air that cannot be seen. A single fault can turn safety into disaster. The legend of the corpse ship reminds crews that the ocean remains indifferent. It can take a ship swiftly, without leaving a mark or a witness. Historians classify the Ourang Medan as unverified, yet they do not dismiss the underlying message. The sea holds many tragedies that were never recorded. Some ships vanished without sending a signal. Others went down with reports that never reached authorities. The tale survives because it captures the feeling of vulnerability that every sailor knows when crossing open water. It stands as a reminder that even in an age of radios and radar, the ocean can still conceal its secrets. The ship that some later called the Ourang Medan now rests somewhere beneath the Strait of Malacca, if it existed at all. No marker identifies the place. No official record describes the event in detail. All that remains is a story passed through time by newspapers, sailors, and investigators who attempted to understand a mystery without evidence. The calm sea that afternoon offered no warning and no explanation. A ship appeared. A crew lay still. A fire rose. Then the ocean closed over everything. Whether the tale is a reconstruction of several real incidents or an isolated tragedy that went unrecorded, it endures because it reflects a truth older than modern navigation. The sea does not need storms to take a ship. Sometimes it needs only silence, chemistry, and a moment that passes too quickly to understand. Some mysteries sink, others remain afloat in memory.